Welcome back to New York Wedding Jam, the podcast for modern couples. I am your host, Martine Dardignac, joined by my co-host, Jason Alisea. Jason, how's it going today?
Pretty good, Martine. I've got a wedding tomorrow in here in Long Island, so I'm excited about that, and I'm excited to be working with my second shooter and my assistant. But
Nice.
yeah, I'm looking forward to a good day. I think the weather's supposed to be okay tomorrow, so it's gonna be all right.
Always thrilled when the wedding is fairly local to me. Not that I mind like going to other places, depending on where the wedding is happening, but it's so nice to be like, oh yes, tomorrow I've got a wedding and I don't have to like pack up and bring everything with me and go stay in a hotel
You
before
don't have to
the
bring a
event.
tent, is
I don't
basically
have to
what.
bring a tent,
Yeah,
is
and
what
a
I'm saying.
sleeping bag.
Exactly. And then knowing that I'm coming back to my own bed at the end of the night is also kind of nice and helpful.
How often do you stay in hotels?
It just
What percentage
depends.
of your weddings?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a super large percentage, but maybe 15%, twenty
That's
percent.
quite a bit.
Yeah, it is a bit, and but like even if I'm not staying in a hotel, a lot of the times the drive is like over an hour. So especially depending on the timing of the wedding, there's a lot of back and forth that happens. So when it's like 15 or 20 minutes away, I'm like, great. And this one,
Right.
I have a wedding next week and it's in the morning. So I'll be like, the wedding ends at 6. And I'm like, this is awesome. Home
So
by 7.
right. My wedding is also tomorrow is fairly close. I think it's 40 minutes away. Although with traffic it could be a little bit more, but I'm still very okay with that.
Yeah. Well, have fun at the wedding tomorrow. I think, I don't know if you've ever participated in this piece, Jason, but do you know if the couple has rehearsed their processional and recessional for tomorrow?
So one thing that I always ask my couples is, are you interested in rehearsal coverage the day before? And sometimes they say yes and sometimes they say no. But I have to tell you, oftentimes what people think is a wedding rehearsal is really a rehearsal dinner
Right.
where the parents of both sides and the friends of both sides come together and have a meal. But they aren't always rehearsing the thing.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like people underestimate how important that piece of it is. A lot of venues nowadays to either charge for rehearsal or don't allow them at all.
right.
Or they'll say like we can do it the day of, but I've always found that really hectic when the only rehearsal time is like the day of the event. We do what we have to, and if you don't have any other opportunities, sometimes people don't want to do it because the wedding party members aren't going to be in town in enough time to actually get that done. Like maybe they're just arriving for the rehearsal dinner or the night before and they don't have enough time to actually get a practice in. What I've seen happen so often is when we don't rehearse, people have a very hard time understanding what they're going to do when they get up there. I know it seems silly, right? Like we're just walking down an aisle. Shouldn't be that tragic of an occurrence, but there are questions like, do I link arms with the person that I'm walking with? Do we have to step with the same foot at the same time? Fast should I be moving? Especially because we're in New York. Jason, I'm going to tell you right now, there are some people who are like speed walking down this aisle as if it's a race. I'm like, this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yes. And as a documentarian, it really bothers me. You know what? If everyone's gonna race down the aisle, that's fine. But it kills me when like one person or one pair of people come down very slow, and the next one is speeding, and then the one
Right.
after that is slow, and then the next one's medium. And I know people are not professional actors. I understand that. And we're not professional parade marchers. I get it.
Right.
But they're really sometimes it's really hard to get that. And I also think that I think a lot of people I've seen we talk about rehearsals. I've seen situations where people didn't know that they were going to be partnered with a certain person.
Right.
And then they were uncomfortable with being partnered with that person. And then maybe that girl's boyfriend doesn't want her to be partnered with that other person. And issues like that are kind of being bubbling up on the wedding day itself.
Right. And like,
So,
I've seen ones where like the height difference is so stark between the two partners that trying to figure out how we're stepping together is a little bit challenging, right? And so things like that I think are really important for people to consider as about why the rehearsal is actually kind of an important factor. Other things that I've seen just in terms of like when do I move, right? Do I when they get to the front, or should I start moving before they've gotten all the way to the end? Where do I stand when I get to the front of the aisle? If you haven't practiced, that might seem like, well, I got here first and I'll just stand in the front part as opposed to like filling from the outside in, which is normally what we do, mostly because honor attendants typically are closest to the couple, and they've got some responsibilities that are going to factor into that. So if you're the honor attendants should come in last and be standing in place, but that means we have to actually leave enough space for them, and sometimes that's hard to space it out if you haven't practiced and don't know exactly where you're going to be standing. Sometimes I've seen people like have their backs facing towards the audience because they didn't realize that we actually had to angle it so that we could actually capture people's faces in the ceremony for photo and video teams. I'm sure you appreciate when people are actually facing outwards so that we can take shots of people that are actually in space and not their backs. For example. So things like that I think are really important for people to remember as they're practicing the rehearsal. It's not meant to be anything laborious. Usually I can get a rehearsal done when I do them inside of 15 minutes, assuming that that everybody is ready. But I've found that people are very visual learners. So one of the other things that I now suggest that couples do is if you know what song everybody's walking into, like have it queued up and ready for them to practice to it, because that's another one that comes up, which it doesn't seem like it should be that big a deal, but people are like, wait, I gotta pace it to the song, like I don't want to be off beat. And so like now they're trying to like walk in a rhythm that makes sense with the song that they've chosen. So having the song playing sometimes helps people get a better sense of what that rhythm should be. So I try and do that too, just to give it a better sense of what this is going to feel like day of. But that's why it's so important that I think you actually practice in the space that you're going to be using. I've heard people say things like, "Oh well, we can just practice elsewhere." The problem is that it's not going to feel or look the same, and so when you don't get to practice at your actual venue, the next day might be hard. So I've had people do things like, oh well, we practiced but I was facing in the other direction when that happened, right? And so now you're having to reorient yourself. Or the space that we used had a much smaller aisle, and so I wasn't prepared for this long walk. Or you said to walk down when they got to the middle, but I can't really see. Is the middle where the chair, like from the end of the chairs to the beginning of the chairs, or the middle of the aisle itself, which are two different things in some cases, right? And so things like that I just think if you see it set up the way that it's supposed to be and we're walking in the same space, we get some familiarity with it. I also think, truthfully, here's the real truth of why I think people have a hard time with it, is I think a lot of people get stage fright and they don't want to walk down this aisle with a bunch of people. So even with practice, sometimes it's kind of like, oh wait, what do I do? Because they're worried about the audience as opposed to just doing the thing that they need to do, which is walk, which isn't that big a deal. But if you don't like being kind of center of attention, no matter what you do, those folks walking down the aisle are definitely center of attention, at least until the couple is up front, and then they become the center of attention. So it is important, I think, to practice it, especially if you have little kids that are also going to be coming down the aisle. So
I'm gonna have to disagree with you only for entertainment purposes, because when children are when children are coming down the aisle and they don't know what they're doing, for photo and video, that is the best. They run. Sometimes they walk and throw flowers in the wrong direction. Sometimes they cry. And the last thing I need is like a well-behaved child walking down the aisle.
Jason, no.
I want children to be children and have fun. Like use that as a runway. Take off. You know.
I mean, I will say, like, even when we've got the mishaps, at least the kids are usually fairly well behaved. I'll tell you some of the things that I've seen happen with the kids that do make for good entertainment value, probably, but probably not what the couple wanted in terms of like an actual processional. But whatever, it's
It
fine.
depends on the couple.
Well, like, so I had one couple, and they had a really large processional of like 19 or 20 couples,
Oh my
that
God.
were walking down. So it was fairly large, and it was a religious ceremony. So there was a lot of stuff happening, and there were a lot of people who were in it for particular reasons or whatever. And they had a flower girl, but the flower girl wanted to see the bride walk in. And so when it was time for her to go, she was like, "Absolutely not. I haven't seen her yet, right? Like, I haven't seen the bride come in, so I'm going to wait. Like, I'm waiting for her to come in. It's other people's kids. I always tell people this, like you should probably have somebody in the back with the kid who can get them to do what they're supposed to do at the time. Otherwise, like, if they just honestly don't want to walk, like, that should be okay too, and you should understand that that's a possibility. It is a distinct possibility that they decide not to go. I've seen that happen many a time, and somebody just stays in the back with the kid. That's fine. But in this case, after she saw the bride come in, she realized that she was at the back of the room with a bunch of strangers and then wanted to walk down the aisle. So she actually came in after the bride. Like, she did her walk down the aisle after the bride and groom had, like, after the bride was up in the front, because she was like, no, 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 like, I'm going to miss the whole thing from back here. I have to go now. And I was like, well, sometimes you gotta let it rock on what the kid is doing. But I've seen the video for that wedding, and it's funny, especially because I saw the whole thing happen, and I'm sure, like, the bride and groom had no idea what was really going on, until they watched their video later. But it is the reason why I say it's important for everybody to practice.
So one other thing that people, I think, even for rehearsals, like what they forget about oftentimes is the recessional.
Mm.
And so, I've been to weddings where the planner or the coordinator is kind of running through the motions at the beginning, and they don't really discuss the recessional. And
Yeah,
I think that's important too because uh,
there's a rhythm
I mean,
to it.
listen, the wedding's over, but you have to kind of exit smooth in some kind of orderly and smooth fashion as well.
Right.
And most importantly, you need to know if you're doing a receiving line or not. And there are some guests don't know. Are you doing this or are you not? And sometimes parents, right, tend to be older and maybe their generation did receiving lines. Everybody did receiving lines back in the day.
Right.
So you have some parents waiting and greeting guests and thanking guests for coming, and then other parents are not. They're outside, or
Right.
they've moved on to cocktail hour. They've already started drinking and that
Right.
open bar package that they wanted so badly. So,
Exactly.
so with the lack of communication about how we're doing recession, are we doing a receiving line, and all of that business, and the flow of traffic for not the guests, but the guests are led by the wedding party, right? Are the
Right.
bride and groom or the couple and their wedding party, are they flowing right into cocktail hour? Are they leaving? Are they going outside the church if you're having it in church? Or are they staying back and kissing and hugging everybody, right? So
Exactly.
that part needs to kind of be talked about and figured out among that group too. And it often is not.
Yeah, so I always do rehearsals include both processional and recessional, for that same reason. I have a conversation with my couples well beforehand, well before we get to rehearsal even, on whether they're doing a traditional receiving line or not. Most people don't do that anymore at this point. And normally I need to get the couple out so that they can go take some pictures or sign their marriage license. And so I'm usually trying to make sure that the room is cleared out as quickly as possible. And one of the things that is required in order to clear out the room is that the wedding party, including parents, are not standing around. because if you stand, the guests will stand there with you. Your guests want to greet you. They absolutely are going to get an opportunity to do that. But we have a little bit of business, usually, sometimes a lot if they haven't done a first look, of stuff that we have to handle before we can get to you mingling with your guests. And part of that is making sure you've exited cleanly and are in a space that doesn't have your guests swarming you at the end.
Yeah, it's important. It's important for the flow, for the feel, and for the guests to understand what to do. They follow the lead of the couple and the wedding party. So that's
Yes.
and the parents, or the whole people, all the people involved in the wedding. I don't know if
Right.
you call that the wedding party or, but I think so. But
I mean, that's the best word I found for it. So, and
anyone
again,
who's
everybody
anyone who's a
who's in the processional,
right,
VIPs,
all
if
of
you
the special
will.
guests.
Yes.
Right. All right. Well, Martine, this was informative, and if you're listening, make sure you get your rehearsals in and make them complete. Make sure everybody understands. And thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, Jason.
Bye, Martine.